Now for the Persona 5 Tactica review. Fighting games can be a fickle thing, kind of like choosing a phone or whatever piece of technology to regularly use in your life. Some may want something simple, easy to interact with, and just works. Others may be looking for something that gives them a lot to express themselves with, ways of customizing how it looks, works, or even some crazy functions that nobody's imagined yet. For example, I have a friend of mine that had a Steam Deck and jerry-rigged it so that it could become a mobile streaming setup. Well, I just want to use my Nintendo Switch to just play some good old RPGs. In a sense, a lot of people can get into fighting games easier if they can just press buttons and somehow win a game, while others will go through the nitty-gritty and figure out the effective positioning, optimal combos, what's plus or minus on blocks. That's why a lot of people in my country prefer something like Tekken, while some of the nerdier kids like me gravitate to, Guilty Gear. That doesn't mean you can't arrive at a place somewhere between these two poles. It's exactly what many game developers have been trying to achieve lately. To give something easy to use that even a simple understanding of attacking and blocking can give casual players an engaging experience, but at the same time leaves room for fine-tuning and a depth that more avid players can sink their teeth into. This is exactly how you develop a competitive scene and at the same time grow a fan base, possibly. After all, not every soccer fan has to be an athlete. Granblue Fantasy Versus, or GBVS, is exactly one of those games, trying to put something simple to learn but has a good balance built in with complex concepts right under the hood. Created in collaboration with Arc System Works, a studio that has made a reputation with anime games and maybe one of the fighting game series I'm a big fan of. A strong IP and a skilled and well-renowned studio to make it? What could go wrong?
Community quarantine is
Private hospitals in Manila are now at full capacity.
Or canceled, and young athletes robbed of their chances to shine.
Apparently, a lot. The world stopped back in 2020, not long after Granblue Versus was released. Back then, it was okay not to rely on good netcode because it was hard to match the intensity of live events, where the only internet connection you had to consider was for the live stream. With the lack of its ability to be played well online, it didn't quite matter what the quality of the game was. Nobody could be at live events, and the only way to play it was online, and Granblue Fantasy Versus just wasn't equipped for that, and with that, its fate was sealed. However, the creators have not given up. Success won't always be there, but it will eventually be found by those who are persistent. They've continued to support the title, and after a few years, have come up with an expansion, GBVS Rising. New characters, new mechanics, new content, and for good measure, great netcode. Now, I'm already quite the fan of the original release, so instead of asking the question of it being a good game, I'd rather go into detail as to why you should try this game out. So, stick for a few rounds, let's break it down. If you've seen GBVS before, then Rising isn't all that different. I mean, let's be fair, it's an expansion, but you do see the expertise of Arc System come into play here, translating these 3D models into pseudo 2D sprites, pairing that up with animated effects to fit that aesthetic. It's great! Seeing the gorgeous character designs from Granblue Fantasy come to life and, animated even better than the originally animated series did was that was a treat for me. When it comes to actually playing the game, the audio-visual language of GBVS Rising is pretty clear. You can tell when you're hitting, blocking, or if anyone is using a special attack. The layout of the UI is neatly organized there on the top as well, giving you all the information you need to figure out the situation at a glance. So in this case, the form doesn't come second to the function, and the information the title tries to relay to you is consistently direct and easy to understand. Meaning if you manage to fail to guard something, you immediately know why. And most of the time, it's, your fault and not my controller having faulty buttons, which has been my trusty excuse for all these years. Don't worry, now I can blame my internet connection. Backgrounds are usually a second priority in fighting games. So long as you have an okay looking background, you're good to go. But to add to the immersion, they decided to add animated characters and areas that are entirely recognizable if you're a fan of the game. To add to that, they even have these little events that happen between rounds to give the fight a little bit more energy. These little surprises make the game a bit more exciting and fun for spectators. The audio dimension does a great job as well. As I mentioned before, there are matching sounds to the different events within a fight. A throw, a block, a hit, a counter hit, they've got it all. You also have heavy hitters for your voice sounds behind your beloved characters that make it much easier for me to want to try them out. My favorites are Luane, Anila, and Zeta for undisclosed reasons. Whether you prefer hearing the English or Japanese voices is, I think, a matter of preference at this point. Personally, I prefer the Japanese voices because I think they hit some female characters just a little bit better. Finally, the music. Well, when you have the names behind making stuff for like Final Fantasy XIV, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Kingdom Hearts, Octopath Traveler, that's already quite the resume, right? Now, you have lots of characters, each of them having themes that would describe each character's story or personality. My personal favorites would be Avres and The Prettiest Alchemist. Sure, I'm not a fan of every track, but they all sound great in the grand scheme of things. If there's anything to take away from this, Arc System isn't going to disappoint when it comes to making anything look great on presentation, especially when they have something like Cygames behind them to produce the title. For this part, I'd like to focus on the new stuff GBVS Rising has, because there's a lot. To quickly run down the basics, you can make a simple 3-hit combo with any of the light, medium, and strong attack buttons, where light attacks are faster and strong attacks deal more damage. You can cancel them into special moves, which you have 2 methods of doing, and if you use the enhanced version, it's possible to make an even stronger combo out of it. Now, for the new stuff, first, instead of making simple input have a cooldown on use, it just has slightly lowered damage. Technical, or the traditional way of doing special moves, does about 10% more damage, but do remember you also have to consider things like damage scaling. This makes simple input methods more attractive to use but does not completely overshadow the old way of doing things. To add on to this, there's now a new version of the special move that requires like half of your charge bar, which is more powerful and in most cases easy to combo into. Next, there's now a new set of normals that players can make use of. For example, if you're holding the dash button and then hold forward and then an attack button, you get these great lunging attacks that have different uses per character. With that, they even added a dash button to be able to do these moves almost instantly. Not only is this giving characters a longer effective range, but it also makes it possible to deal with zoners better for those who are completely oppressed by those with massive zoning capabilities like Matera. Finally, there's this new way of breaking guards and getting out of combos by using these 3 bravery stars on top of your life bar. If you want to break a guard, you expend one of these. If you want to get out of a combo, you use 2. It's also possible to continue a combo from a guard break with a rush, though you're gonna have to use more resources to do it. So can you please translate this to plain English, please? I hear you jest. And well, to put it simply, the original GBVS was very much like Street Fighter V, where you try to figure out each other's ranges and how much they know the matchup. Then proceed to press any advantages they find against each other. In short, it's a very defensive game, where you tend to react to each other's mistakes. Here in Rising, you can change the game's flow if you're willing to pay what you have to. They've rebalanced how quickly you gain charge, so you won't have to hesitate on when to use a rush move or a guard break, or even that ultimate skill if you think it's time, to give you the ability to keep them guessing even after they manage to get to a more comfortable position. They've given you the ability not only to respond to your opponent, but also make openings for yourself. Meaning, you can take risks, you can make possibilities for yourself, but you can also play like you did back then. It's all pretty viable, and each of them carries its own risks and rewards because of how the damage works in that game. This is nothing short of an upgrade from the original release. Well, there's an expansion of the story, and due to the agreement with the review, that's all I can really say about that. And, well, no more weapon grind, so that's a good thing to me, yay. When it comes to the characters, though, there's a lot to talk about. On release, there will be 28 characters, so that's the original roster, the DLC characters that came after them, and 4 new characters in Rising itself to boot. So, very generous offerings with characters alone. But, Alan, are they any good, or are we looking at can-re alternatives where it's hard to tell them apart sometimes? So, the initial roster covers a lot of the good old character types that we see in fighting games. You have the Shoto types that have fireballs and in that invincible uppercut. You have the grapplers, the long range types, the mix-ups, all these nice things. Now for all the new characters we have, design-wise, they're all quite distinct from each other. But in terms of moveset, there's a reasonable overlap between a bunch of them. And I think that's good. For example, Zeta and Anila are quite similar in how they would be ideally used. But they're different in the sense that Anila has a bit more of maze lunging dolphins going on, while Zeta can capitalize much better on mix-ups. So there's a strong sense of variance between them despite having an overlap. Others have movesets that you can say are inspired by other characters that Arceus has developed over the years, but still have a distinct enough design to be called different. And this is kind of a natural progression when you're developing a roster. You just have these 0.5 or 0.75 between all these other archetypes that we know about the fighting game genre. And this is where a lot of people will find their respective niches, because not everybody will perfectly fit into the Shoto type. Someone's gonna want a scary grappler and somebody else wants to have a grapple and a counter move at the same time. And we're just gonna keep seeing these things as we go on. And this, by my book, is how you make a roster. In other words, I love these characters. The biggest shock is that this has a free-to-play version. Having 4 playable characters and a part of story mode available, I don't know how these 4 characters will rotate over time, but I think it's gonna be sort of like League of Legends. It almost guarantees a player base at launch. Also, you can access that Fall Guys mode called Granblue, which is nice to see many cute avatars play some sort of Takeshi's Castle game while on screen. They also have a figure mode where you can customize their poses and make your own little situations with characters in the game, though most of them you have to still buy in the shop. There's also going to be this replay theater where you can review matches with, which might be the ones that you find funny or ones you want to review because you want to play better. Finally, let's talk about that netcode. Logging in was a bit of trouble because for some reason my name couldn't be allowed on the server, so if I had to use a default name. If Skyfarer gets through, this is a terrible error to deal with. No! I can't have... How is my name censored? But once I got in, it was pretty easy to get a match. It was pretty nice to have a good match with a bunch of people, so long as you're in the same region, and ideally 100 ms ping and below, you're gonna have a great match. You can still maintain a match at around 300 ms. It's still gonna do things, but it's not a super great experience, meaning if your internet is not that great, the netcode can only go so far. The arcade lobbies have actually improved vastly just because of how they've integrated all of the online matches in one place. You can queue up like normal and just be solo, wait for casual or competitive matches, or you can be in the same lobby with all these other players and want to match up with specific people by lining up for a machine. One thing I truly enjoyed having is being able to spectate other people's matches in the same lobby. This is a big deal for me. This is something I like to do even in actual arcades. I like watching people just play, and having an experience like that, even though it was a little buggy, was something I really wanted to have, and I'm just glad it's there. In other words, vast improvement on the online lobbies and the netcode. They have really done a good job with this, and it is for this reason that I am grateful that they have continued to support this game, and it's just so beautiful now. Okay, finally, let's wrap it up. While I enjoyed Granblue versus its original form, I would say that the game design felt lopsided towards more defensive players. The presentation of new mechanics toys with my imagination of how matches can look like and who can come out on top. This unpredictable nature of fights on top of the vastly expanded roster fills me with confidence about how fun the game will be. On top of that, they haven't lost sight of their goal of finding the middle ground between a complex system and accessible gameplay, where simple commands are becoming more viable as a way to interact with the game. Finally, they've even gone to the lengths of making a new game mode that has no relation to the fighting game and provided a new venue for a group of fans to just have fun in. Cygames and Arceus are laser focused on making a game that many can enjoy, even if it means not playing the fighting game itself. Heck, you don't even have to own it, just running that through my mind, it's so wild. So, with all that said, why don't you give this title a try, take a risk, maybe you have fun. Granblue Fantasy vs Rising might be paving the way for something new in fighting games. Scoring a 4.5 out of 5. Available on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. And that is the end of the review. Thank you guys for watching, I really do appreciate it. Now if you want to see other stuff we work on, or basically everything we write about, that's going to be on RainbowFiles.com. If you want to see our little updates here and there, it's going to be on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, also known as X. I'm so happy I got this game. I'm so happy I was able to review this, and it turned out so great. Till next time,